I'm Alice Emery. I work for Hospice of Holland and Keystone Palliative Care. We work in Holland and Grand Rapids, and I started out as internal medicine and now do hospice and palliative medicine. And I started doing this lecture about 10 years ago after I learned to do meditation. And meditation had a big impact on my daily life, and I thought I would share it a little bit. But over the years, I've broadened my interest in alternative therapies and added a few more things. So I thought I'd add a few more things to this lecture. So it's broadened out to mindfulness and the science of happiness. Oh, now I can't advance the slides anymore.
You should have control of them.
Oh, boy. So the question, I guess, is why? Why do we even need to talk about this? What is the purpose of talking about happiness, which we think happiness is sort of something that's personal, that's going on in the background of our lives. It's not really part of our career. And maybe you haven't heard any lectures about how to be happier, but I think it's worth talking about because maybe we come from STEM fields and we haven't put much time into the woo-woo or the psychology of medicine. And I think it makes us happier, more rounded people. It affects our families, and then it affects our patients as well. So I think it's worth putting some time into the mental health and emotional health of all of us. You all know there's an epidemic of depression and anxiety in our society here in the United States. I think it's affected the younger generation, that people since the onset of smartphones in 2010. There's been a huge rise in young people having depression. It used to be that older people were the most depressed, maybe older men were the most depressed of the cohorts, but now young people actually are as depressed or more depressed than almost anyone else. And do you think it's our business to help patients be happy? I do, because I think it's part of being healthy. And I feel like maybe not in surgery or in internal medicine, but at least in palliative medicine, we need to think about the internal experience of our patients, what they're going through, what their families are going through. And as we follow people a little bit more long-term, not just the ones who are imminently dying, but the ones who have a little more time with us, I feel like if we have some suggestions for them and some ideas on how to work things through, how to deal with difficult times, I think it's very helpful for our patients. So it's also important to take care of yourself. You have to function well to be good at what you do. We don't really realize when we're young how much of the way we behave is state dependent. What state you're in depends affects what you say. It colors your emotional impact on other people. If you're floating along in a great mood, you're going to have a different impact on everyone you meet than if you're under a black cloud and having a horrible day. And we probably don't even realize that we can't just turn that off and walk right into a room and have that not affect us. One time I went to a grand rounds, an internal medicine grand rounds, and it was about palliative care. And there was a palliative care physician right up there in front. And he said, before I go into a new patient's room, I stop and take a couple deep breaths. And I thought, wow, that's a funny thing to say at grand rounds, because grand rounds is usually, it's pretty academic. It's not going to talk much about the internal experience of being a doctor. But that was I thought really good advice, because what state we're in is really impactful. And if we're going to function our best, we want to be in a calm, centered space, because the people that we're dealing with are going to be struggling. I mean, the families are struggling, the patients are struggling, even the staff of the hospital a lot of times is struggling with the family and the patients because they're not getting what they think needs to be done. So if we can come in as the calm in the storm, it's really, really helpful. So just determinants of happiness. I think that people believe that a lot more of it is related to your life situation and uncontrollable. Like, say you're disabled, or you're in chronic pain, or you're living in a war zone. You think that therefore you have to be unhappy. And I have talked to people who say, if you're in a bad situation, you're going to be unhappy. But I feel like that's really not as much of it as you think. I have at my age now met a lot of people who grew up in a really terrible situation, like, a war zone, or something like that. And then they ended up being the most peaceful and joyful people in their later years. And there's genetic factors, that's for sure. When my kids took judo, we had a judo teacher who was just the coolest, most zen kind of old guy, but he grew up in a very difficult time in Russia, and had gone through a whole lot with the I guess communist regime there. But his son, who had grown up in America, living a pretty decent life, was kind of a grumpy guy, and had a totally opposite personality to his very relaxed dad. So I feel like, a lot of things that you say, this will make us unhappy, it doesn't have to. And it's depends on your attitude and how you absorb it and what it means to you. I think there have been some cool studies looking at things like baseball cards. If you have a smile on your rookie card, then what happens to you 10 years later, 20 years later? Or if you have a smile on your high school photo versus a scowl versus a half smile, what happens to you, over time? And the happier faces in those snapshots end up actually living longer and living happier lives, just because your own attitude affects so many things that you don't realize. I remember once I had a guy who was working on my computer, and I was talking to him about pessimism versus optimism, because he felt that pessimism was the best attitude, because then you don't get disappointed, and your life it is what it is, face it, it is what it is. But I think that if you're pessimistic, you may miss some opportunities for good things, because if you're optimistic, maybe you make a foolish decision now and then because of that, but you also have, I think, a lot more chances for good outcomes if you have a positive attitude about the future and about the people that are around you. What do we got? Okay, so what do we mean happy? I mean, happy is a kind of a childish term, you could say. So if we break it down a little bit, there's the short lasting elation, and there's the long-term contentment. Sort of like the short acting morphine and the morphine ER, we all know what it feels like to be joyful in the moment, like when we pass the boards or something else wonderful happens. But what we really want is the kind of long acting contentment that has a different feel to it over your lifetime. So you could say hedonic, momentary well-being, sense of pleasure, peace, joy, elation. That's more of a dopamine and instant serotonin hit. But what really is the most impactful in the long run is that eudaimonic flourishing, having purpose, growing, self-acceptance, working towards mastery on things, autonomy in your life, and a positive connection to others. Those are all components of the sense of long-term happiness that we can achieve by working on things about ourselves and our lives. This eudaimonic flourishing was was a concept elucidated by Aristotle, and he was talking about how hedonic happiness, just like the instant hit of gratification, is sort of a vulgar kind of happiness, and he felt like the other kind of happiness, the longer type, was the type to really go for. So we want to be happy ourselves, and we want our patients and our children and our families to be happy too, and to live their best lives. And so the question is, how do we prescribe happiness as physicians, as family members? How do we spread whatever we've got to others, and how do we encourage positive things? So there are a bunch of lifestyle factors. Lifestyle medicine really promotes the idea that not only does better health lie within your ability to control with behaviors, but also happiness and emotional stability. So there's a health promoting diet, there's better exercise, there's better sleep, there's managing environmental exposures. That means things like tobacco, alcohol, lead and mercury, that sort of thing. And there are mental health habits or techniques that we could adopt and advocate that are all part of lifestyle medicine. They have, like they call the big five, which are things that they try to encourage patients to do. And in lifestyle medicine, they actually talk about these things at doctor office visit. So everyone knows the components of exercise are cardio, fitness, stretching maybe, and strength training. So we all know that it's good to be active. And when I see people who are 93 years old and they haven't had a hip fracture and they're still independent, I say, wow, you must have had an active lifestyle. And they say, oh yeah, I played tennis and I was a professional this and that, and I did this and that, and I was a gym teacher. You know, it seems like those active people end up holding on to their health a lot longer. These were just some older ladies that I went kayaking with, and they're still pulling their kayaks up the hill, you know, even though they're 75 years old. So I feel like the more active you are, the better it is for your body and also for your mood. If you just get up and dance for 5 minutes, you're going to feel so much better, no matter what's going on. So I feel like encouraging people to keep moving is really important. And some people get it and some people don't. You know, there are a lot of people who sit all day at work and then they go home and watch TV in the evening. And I feel like this experiment has never been run before. We have no idea what's going to happen if to people who are sedentary their whole day, as young people, as teenagers, as young adults. We've never had a cohort that's as sedentary as the current young people growing up. I don't know what's going to happen to their bone density, how much pain they're going to have, how much movement they're going to maintain into their later adult years. But we definitely need to encourage everybody to get moving more. Okay, diet. What is the healthiest diet? There's a lot of debate about that. We definitely know that better, healthier diet improves your mood. There's a website called nutritionfacts.org, and that one is a sort of like Consumer Reports of healthy diet. It goes through all the studies on every question you can think of, like how many eggs should I eat a week, and almost any question you have about diet, they have a video on it that goes through all the relevant research and helps you figure it out. So I really like nutritionfacts.org. This is a picture of somebody's Thanksgiving dinner on the right. Those are 2 cauliflower heads with mushroom gravy instead of a roast beef based Thanksgiving dinner or a turkey dinner. And then on the left, there's example of someone who's made a very pretty cake out of pineapple and watermelon instead of baked flour and sugar and butter concoction. So I feel like whenever I talk to patients, I do ask them, what do you eat? Just one sentence, what do you eat? And mostly they answer, well, I try to eat healthy. And then I say, well, what do you mean by that? And they say, well, I eat a lot of chicken. And then they kind of trail off because they don't really know what am I going to say is healthy. And I say, well, how about vegetables? Do you eat vegetables? And oh, yeah, well, no, not really. No, does French fries count? We don't really eat vegetables. And I feel like saying that's what all my pain patients have in common. But it is well known that vegetables contain tons and tons of phytonutrients that we're just, finding more and more and more things that are good for us in fruits and vegetables. And more and more, we're finding the negative effects of packaged and ultra processed foods. So I feel like if you want to say the shortest version of what's a healthy diet, home cooked, whole foods, including fruits and vegetables, that makes your diet much healthier than the standard American diet. The standard American diet is too much ultra processed foods. Like 60% of people's food is ultra processed, meaning it was broke down into powders, reconstituted into something that looks like a food item. And the additives and things are really wrecking people's health in the United States. That's one of the biggest factors that's causing chronic disease, I believe, is the ultra processed diet. Yes.
So I've had patients, argue to me that, no, they don't eat that many fruits or vegetables, but they can buy these gummies and these capsules in the pharmacy, which are kind of reconstituted fruits and vegetables, and they can take a couple of the orange capsules in the morning and a couple of the green capsules at night, and then they don't have to eat any vegetables.
Well, I think that there's a lot of people who would prefer to take pills, supplements and that sort of thing. And they figure if it's natural or if it's a supplement, therefore it's not bad for you. But I don't think that at all is the same as eating whole foods, because whole foods have so many things in them that are not going to be found in that vitamin C capsule or that, that supplement, unless you're going to say, well, this supplement has, a pound of kale in every pill. I mean, I don't think they really do that. They're mostly using, lab created chemicals and putting them in the pill, and they don't include all the other things. Like, when you talk to people who sell marijuana, they say, like, compared to Marinol, which nobody seems to really like, it is just a lab created single item chemical versus marijuana, which has all those other terpenes and all those other related chemicals and makes people feel a lot different than Marinol does. And I feel like all the foods that we eat have still unknown positive effects. And the whole foods, the vegetables, the things that come from nature are just going to have tons and tons of more positive effects on you than something that comes out of a package with a bunch of writing on the outside of the plastic. All right, so now just a few more little small things that are easy to recommend to people. Journaling is something that I think we don't think very highly of as an important intervention. Maybe as kids, we kept a diary for a while and wrote things in it. But there have been some studies on journaling. I think Duke did a study called 3 Good Things, where they asked people to write down 3 good things that happened that day in the evening. And that would be something that touched your heart or something that an accomplishment or just something positive that you saw. And after doing that for 4 weeks, the people just really felt so much better about their day, and they could look back and see all this positive stuff in their journal, and they ended up keeping on doing it. Like 75% of them kept on going with it just because it made them feel more positive. And some people keep a gratefulness journal, like a list of things they're grateful for. And I feel like gratefulness is a good place to start if you're mentally kind of at a loss on how to get from this bad place to a better place. I think starting with gratefulness is something that everybody can get to. Almost whatever state you're in, you can say, yeah, well, at least I have this, and at least I have that. And you start with a list of, well, at least I do have this. And pretty soon you're, well, I have these beautiful trees next to me, and I have this lovely grassy field behind my, backyard. So it actually, I think, as you start to think of what you're grateful for, things that you didn't put there, but that are there and that you can appreciate. And whether it's a clean environment around you that somebody else cleaned, or whether it's nature out your back window, I feel like gratefulness it's like a ramp upwards. If you can start on the bottom rung, but you start climbing, and it improves your mood quite a bit. So I feel like a gratitude journal is a good thing to keep for a while if you find yourself in murky waters.
So I just put in the chat box for those that are interested. You mentioned the Duke study on the 3 good things.
Yeah.
There's actually a link, and you can do that on your phone. You can do that online. And I put the link to that in the chat box. In case you're interested in doing that. It's a simple thing to do. And I just wanted to affirm that I do that every day. The app on my phone, 3 things at the end of the day.
Wow.
And I've been doing it for a long time, and I appreciate the value that I've had from that, so.
Now, Dr. Mulder is a real mellow guy, and I think everybody should do whatever he does. Try and be better.
I'm gonna just pause on that one a little bit.
Yeah, well, another thing that people, some people traditionally have done over many, many years is prayers. And I would say that in a generic sense, whether, it's one religion or another, the idea of praying to try to reconnect yourself with the spiritual element of the world, I think is a positive thing in people's lives. And I feel that it was maybe a mistake for Western medicine to completely shut out the spiritual dimension of the human experience, in its understanding of how the world works. I feel like spirituality is an important part in our makeup, and acknowledging the spirituality around us and within us, I think is really important. Some people pray something like the rosary or a set of prayers over and over and find that very calming. It's a calming ritual for people. And I think anything that is a calming ritual that you can build into your day is a good thing and has a positive effect on people. All right, so here's something that I didn't think about much, or I didn't know about, that is important: connection. Johann Hari, who wrote a really well-researched book about depression in the modern world, said an isolated human is like a bee without a hive. Most people think that, you're just a unit. You can go wherever you want, and it doesn't matter if you have your family around or you don't have your family around. You're just going to be the same. But actually, in the world up until about 200 years ago, people spent all their days, all their time with their family, with their people, with the people who loved them and were connected to them and knew them their whole lives. And in the modern world, there's much more of a sense of isolation, lack of community, lack of association or similarity with the people around you. You can go to work, not really talk to anybody. Everybody's a stranger, and come home again, and no one really knows you. No one really knows your backstory or the deep story. You can easily just slide through groups of people without really having any sense of connection with them. But you are wired for connection. Your limbic system thinks that when you're by yourself, you're in more danger. And there is a tendency towards depression if you're an isolated person. If you're a person who's not got a lot of friends, not got an intimate relationship, not connecting with other people very much, you have a much higher risk of depression than a person who's well connected. And Johann Hari says that we are overusing pharmaceuticals to be the answer for depression. If you say, oh, she was crying yesterday, let's put her on Prozac. That's kind of how it goes nowadays with me. It's like, well, she's been crying. Let's get her on an antidepressant. There's no question of why is she crying, and whether that's a normal response to her situation or not. It's just, let's start an antidepressant. And those antidepressants aren't even that effective for real problems and adjustments and difficulties in life. They're mostly just something to make us feel like we're doing something. So I feel like more increasing the connection of a person who's depressed is more important. And also exercise, getting them moving, is really also very important for people with depression. But connection and being connected with other people is a super important part of maintaining that mental happiness. I have a son who lives in Boston, and he's just by himself up there. And I always tell him, an isolated human is like a bee without a hive. And he's like, oh, mom, but I feel like you're sort of buffered against, like, if you have someone at work who's attacking you, there's a buffering effect of having another person to talk it out with, or someone else in your life. And it's similar with journaling. If you are an isolated person who doesn't have intimate relations where you can tell what's in your heart to another person, you can write it out in your journal, and that kind of feels like talking it out with another person, because you can see it written, you can even answer it back, and it's sort of kept there in a precious little book. So journaling is in effect an anti-isolation technique. And I think isolation is one of our biggest problems in the United States. The number of people who say, I have a close friend that I can tell anything to is way down over the last 50 years. We used to go to church in this country. We used to go to the Lions Club and the Rotary Club and the bowling league. And maybe we went to our friend's house every Tuesday for cards, or we went to grandma's every Sunday afternoon for pie. There just isn't as much of that. There isn't as much of this connected friendship activities in person as there used to be. And that does make a difference to the background mood that that your brain sets up for you. All right, kindness. It's hard to even categorize what these slides are all about. I believe that random acts of kindness is kind of a silly fad way of saying that being kind to other people is a good thing. We all know that volunteering, helping others, makes you feel better. And that's one of the reasons why we went into this field, because we want to help others. Giving help to someone vulnerable, officially at work or unofficially, just makes you feel better. If you drive by a person on the side of the road who's homeless and you think, what could I give this person that would just be positive, and not have some negative effect in the long run? You know, kind words, a bottle of water, something like that is homeless people always want a bottle of water. One of my patients was a homeless guy, and he told me, he said, you should carry a case of water in your car to hand out to the homeless people because they always need that. And I was like, oh, that's a good idea. And he said, yeah, I told the police they need to carry a case of water in their car. It's because they want to have a positive interaction, but they're not quite sure how to start that. So I feel like a lot of times we think, well, I want to have a positive effect on those around me, but I don't have time to go work at the soup kitchen or whatever. But it's easy to just react more kindly to your family and to the people you're working with and the people that you're dealing with. If you just take a little moment, there's a little break between the stimulus and your response where you can have an impact. Like even if you don't have time to go, rake leaves for your elderly neighbor, you could say something kind to a person. And I think last year I said, John Mulder is a wonderful guy who's an anchor for the palliative care community and who we all appreciate and hope he'll continue to influence the med students forever because he has such a positive influence. I always talk to the med students after they meet with you on their Wednesdays, and they always have so many positive things to say about that interaction. I think you're a salesperson for palliative care who is doing immense good in the community. So,
Thank you.
mhm. And I think if you say,
That's a kind thing to say.
go around and just say a few kind things, like to the people who cleaned this room, who set my charts up, who went and did that for me, and who got me this, and who handed me that. I mean, if you can say, boy, you are really making a difference today to someone, not in a sort of generic sense, but in a specific sense, it really is something that sticks with people and makes them feel more happy. And so you're raising the kindness level in your environment. And I feel like a lot of times when you walk around the hospital, everyone's in a bad mood for one reason or another. And if you just have something positive to say that doesn't sound like Pollyanna, you're like, oh, we should all be happy. No one wants to hear that when they're in a bad mood. But if you could say something positive, it could make things a little bit better. Okay, another thing that makes people happy, I'm still good on time, I think, is doing something creative. If you're learning something, or like say learning to play guitar, or learning to do a craft or an art form, I think those things are actually really good for you. They use a different part of your mind. Like if you take a break from studying and you play the cello, you're using a different part of your mind, and you're also you're going to find there's a lot of joy in creating things that you forgot about if you haven't been doing it. Many people just stop creating anything when they get out of school, because when you're in school, there's a lot of requirements to create projects, art and different products. But then when you get out of school, you may find that nobody's doing much creatively, and it really is a joyful thing to create something. I like creating art, and I also like writing poetry. Last year we did a group poetry, we did a group poetry session. I don't know if it went very well, but we did try to create a group poem. But I know a lot of you probably have some creative outlet. Do any of you have a creative outlet? Gosh. Do you make any music? What do you do?
I play with my guitar.
You play
Quite a
guitar?
bit, yeah.
Oh, that's good. You and Johnny Depp. And it's a good thing to switch that to a different side of your brain and be able to do something different like that. Anybody else have a creative outlet they want to share?
I just started taking up pottery. Thought that was pretty cool.
Pottery's so
Yeah,
nice.
and crocheting, and I'm hoping to donate anything that I crochet over the winter time.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah, I was an artist for 20 years before I started doing this.
Whoa, so you're way ahead. Yeah. Wow.
I think it's super important.
Yeah.
I always thought it would be cool, like, you know how when you go to a pediatrician office, sometimes they have things set up for the children to do while they're in the waiting room. I always envisioned having like adult doctor's office having things like easels set up with just paper and markers and have musical instruments and just things like that set up in the room so that people,
Wow.
while they were waiting, could have fun.
That sounds great. Yeah, that is a cool idea. Yeah, so that it sounds like it's outside the bounds of regular medicine, but I do think that helping people learn to be happy or encouraging people to do something creative not only gives permission to talk about that kind of thing, but I think it's just a really positive thing that you can share. All right, so now we're going to talk a little bit about meditation. Meditation is a traditional type of sort of like prayer and centering in some Asian countries, and I think it's spreading over here because it's got such clear positive effects. It helps balance the overactive sympathetic nervous system. We have a lot of stress in the modern world that probably they didn't have in some of the more primitive cultures, and we are carrying a little bit of sympathetic nervous system overdrive in many cases. You need to slow your heart rate, slow your respiratory rate, and if you are able to use meditation to balance your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, you'll find that it has a lot of positive effects. All of our diseases have a stress component, and most chronic illnesses can benefit from meditation. I feel like we're unaware of how much stress we have here. If you go to another country and you see people just living a more relaxed lifestyle, it's pretty eye-opening. If you go to an island country or India or something like that, there's just people are just being a lot more than we are. We're always doing, trying to get something done. Andrew Weil used the term autonomic nervous system imbalance on his assessment and plan, and then he recommended meditation as a way of treating that. And meditation is a cost-effective tool for health promotion in general. It's similar to exercise, and it's often overlooked. And John told me a story before I started this lecture, and I wonder if you would tell it again. Will they be able to hear you?
Sure, yeah. And I mentioned this last year after we did this, and you talked about the importance of centering and breathing. I was having some minor issues with my blood pressure. I think some, I last year had the interesting medical adventure of having a complete aortic dissection. And so since then, they wanted to be fairly diligent about controlling my blood pressure. So I have to check PFTs every morning, and I check blood pressure every morning, and I'm into this routine that was a little disrupted this morning because we had a power outage and my clock, unbeknownst to me, was about 6 or 7 minutes late. So I'm thinking, okay, I got to get there. I need Alice's lecture up on the screen. And so I'm thinking that as I'm doing my vital signs, and I looked at my blood pressure and it was 148 systolic, which is way beyond where it needs to be. And then I realized, you know what, I just need to center. And it was no more than a minute or two, just focusing on my breathing, and retook my blood pressure. Systolic was 131, 17 points within about 2 or 3 minutes, just by recentering and breathing. Last year, I still remember, he said, just, 1, 2, 3 in, hold 1, 2, 3, out 1, 2, 3. I actually do 1, 2, 3, 4, but the same idea. And that's all it took, just to recenter that. And so I think that those moments when we feel a little flustered, whether it be just like the unexpected distraction of the morning, or traffic, or wherever it is where we find ourselves just a little bit, that breathing, it's a simple thing to do. One other thing I want to put in the chat box also, because one of the fathers of our modern meditation movement is Herb Benson, out of Harvard. Yeah, and he wrote on this back in the 70s, I want to say.
The relaxation response.
I'm gonna put that in the
Okay.
chat box.
Okay.
So those that want to just kind of copy that and transfer it to something so they have it later. I think it's a quick read and it's worthwhile.
Yeah, basically it's how to get the parasympathetic nervous system back online. It's any kind of technique that you can do that makes you relax. And there's been some work on that recently, on how to get your parasympathetic system to kick back in. There's some techniques you can look up on YouTube where you try to get yourself back in the rest and digest and relax kind of state. You really need to be balanced between these two. If you've ever tried to focus when you just keep jumping up and you can't sit still, you know that you have to get to the right balance before you can really focus in and be your best. And there are sometimes when your sympathetic nervous system is just on overdrive, if you've had too much coffee or whatever, and you need to find ways to calm down. I think when I see on my screen a little circle going round and round, that means just wait. The next screen will pop up in a few seconds. I call it the computer has a brain worm. There's the worm in there. And that's a good time for me to take a few deep breaths, because I'm usually in a hurry going like, come on, come on, come on. And that's a good time for me to trigger to take a couple deep breaths. I used to not meditate. I did start meditating after I was in contact with a family that were all transcendental meditators, and the patient had COPD, but lived a long time, almost 2 years on hospice. And I did a series of face-to-face visits. And the social worker said, "Wow, they're the coolest family. They're always so calm, and they started evangelizing transcendental meditation to me. And eventually they encouraged me to take the training and do that. And I got my kids all trained in meditation because I thought it would be a helpful skill for them to have as they go out in the world. And it has made a positive difference for me. I know there's a newscaster who says it's made him 10% happier. It's definitely made me 10% happier, and given me kind of like a shelf in my mind of, this is where I can get to. I can get to this spot and sit there. And that's easier when you've practiced centering yourself. Then you know how to go there, and your mind knows how to go there when you just say, okay, wait a minute, I need to settle down and go back to that. So it has been a good thing for me. So it reduces stress and anxiety. It does reduce heart disease and hypertension. I think more like heart attacks. So it's like it reduces the cardiac events, and it reduces substance abuse. So they use meditation to treat patients as part of addiction, and reduces symptoms of PTSD. I know the transcendental meditation people have like free classes for veterans with PTSD to learn how to meditate, and it reduces depression. It makes you feel more positive. Possibly some of these same things could be, you could say, psychedelic experience also does some of these things. And there's some newer studies coming out about using psilocybin or other psychedelics to produce some of these same effects in our palliative care patients or our hospice patients. But this is kind of like a lighter version. Meditation is usually recommended as a daily practice, like 20 minutes a day, 10 minutes a day, 3 minutes a day, whatever you can spare. If you start with 3 minutes a day, you may eventually say, boy, this is so good, I want to expand it to 5 minutes, or I want to expand it to 10 minutes. And it's kind of like a defragging for your brain. Remember, we used to, on your computer, have the ability to defragment things. You'd run this little program and it would show all these scattered things all going back to where they belong. And that's basically what you're doing with meditation. You're unscattering your brain, because when we go through life, when you're listening to the radio while we're driving, or we're listening to tapes while we're doing something else, while we're folding laundry, we're watching YouTube videos, and you just never have that time to just, whoa, let's just slow down, let the thoughts percolate. If you're meditating and thoughts keep bubbling up, the people who teach meditation would say that's because those thoughts were stress thoughts and they needed to bubble up. And there's things that are going to bubble up in our world. I mean, as palliative care physicians, we go from one intense experience to another intense experience to another intense experience to another all day long. And so one family, another family, another family, and you have to be able to sort of go, okay, I'm going to put that one aside and deal with this one, and that one aside and deal with this one. But you do have to go back to those. So you have to have some quiet time, whether it's the whole evening, just letting things percolate, or whether it's just in your meditation, letting those things come back up and think, boy, that guy really looked a lot like my father, or, just how these things affect you. You can't just compartmentalize work and keep it as a separate box with a closed tight lid and not let that percolate through you. Because when you're meditating, you'll find all these little thoughts come up, and they think of them as like bubbles coming up and being released. And it's a good thing. It's good to get those. That's like the processing of the emotional impact of what you've experienced over the last 24 hours. So really, the transcendental meditators say to do 20 minutes twice a day. 20 minutes twice a day seems like a really big ask, but if you do 20 minutes once a day, you probably find that 15 minutes of it, you're just dealing with those little stress thoughts. And it's only the last 5 minutes that you have a completely clear mind. And it's really, really pleasant. If you do it twice a day, then you've got maybe only 5 minutes for the second time that's dealing with those stress thoughts. And then you get the longer period of that clear meditative feeling. So I do recommend thinking about longer meditation times if you can, but it just depends on your own individual mindset and your lifestyle. Let's do a little breathing exercise. Can anybody give me a readout of what they think their stress level is right now? Like on a 1 to 10 scale, if you could say, just like we do with pain scale, what's your stress or angst level right now? What would anybody say is their stress level on a 1 to 5, a 1 to 10 scale?
And this is not limited to this room. You can just unmute and call it out, or you can just put a number in the chat box.
Is there anybody, I'd like you to at least think it in your mind. What is my stress level? I think I'm like a 5 right now, I would say. Usually I'm lower than that.
I'll be honest, it's maybe 7, but overnight it was well over 10.
The scary thing is I never even think about putting a number on the scale, so it's even hard for me to kind of quantify,
It's hard for patients to put a pain number.
Yeah.
So it slips around too, depending on what thought pops in your head, that gives you more of a jolt of stress. So yeah, let's try a little breathing exercise and see if we can learn that. This is something that's easy to learn and easy to teach. So we're going to take, this is all the Navy SEALs use this. They're going to breathe in 1, 2, 3, hold. You don't have to close your glottis, but just sort of hold with the breath in 1, 2, 3, out 1, 2, 3, hold with not much breath in your lungs. Then in, hold 1, 2, 3, out, hold, in, hold, out, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, in, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, out, 1, 2, 3, hold, 2, one more time, in, 1, 2, 3, hold, 1, 2, 3, out, 1, 2, Oh. Okay, now just breathe however you like. Feel what the feeling is in your body. Now, does anybody feel like their stress level's a little lower? Like if you gave it a number, it might have dropped a couple points. So you can do this when you're feeling stressed, and you can teach people to do this. I had a patient who did not want to take pills for anxiety. It's rare these days, but I admire that. And I taught him this breathing exercise, and his family would walk him through it when he was getting worked up, and it always seemed to work. So I do think these things trigger an innate response that's built into our system. Our system has a lot more, our built-in reflexes have a lot more effect on us than we realize. And meditation is meant to do that same thing. Another kind of meditation, besides just holding a thought or a single note in your mind, is loving kindness meditation. And this is more interrelational, and it's really nice for creating a more positive feeling about the people around you. You start out saying, may I be happy today? May I be safe today? May I be healthy, peaceful, and strong? Or you can make up your own ones that resonate with you. May I feel loving kindness today? And then you can branch out to others. May my spouse be happy today. May they be safe. May they be healthy, peaceful, and strong. May they feel loving kindness as they go about their life today. And you can do this, it doesn't take long just to sit and do a few of these, and then you can branch out to other people, like my child, my brother, even my coworker, my boss, or somebody that you don't feel as positive about in general. And that it actually results in a more positive feeling about those people, because you have asked the universe to give them a better day. And it positively affects your interaction with people. If you've taken a moment to wish them a better day. And I feel like this is something that anybody could do. So we have just a few minutes left. Going out in nature is another booster for your mood. They did a study where they asked people to take a walk either in nature or in a downtown urban environment in Japan. And they found that both of them improved your mood, but walking in nature actually improves your mood about 30% more than taking a walk in an urban environment. Gardening is well known to be associated with happiness, and hiking or biking or doing something outdoors is also a good way of combining nature and exercise. I like gardening. This is some stuff from my garden: cherry tomatoes, Concord grapes, and some kale, and then my little garden troll there helping me. I feel like being with pets is also something that's got some positive effects, and there have been some studies showing that if you just pet your dog, your oxytocin level goes up. It's one of those things that's calming. So being around animals and nature is just a simple, easy way to remind us that we are natural beings, part of the natural world, and that there's a whole world of wild things out there that weren't created by humankind. Those trees in the picture were not planted by human workers. Unlike Disney World, there's a whole world that's just natural out there, and it's nice to see that. So making positive changes in your life can be hard. We want to have a growth mindset, saying to ourselves, it's not that I'm this kind of person or that kind of person, but that maybe I don't have those skills. I might say I'm an anxious person, but then on the other end, I might say I'm a person who hasn't put any effort or I haven't effectively learned how to be less anxious yet. So almost always you could say there's a set of skills that go with this thing I want to achieve, and I need to find out what those skills are, and then I can achieve that thing. And if you say everybody's different from the start, one kid is calm, one kid is not calm, maybe it's because this kid's family has the skills and he's picked them up without even thinking. And this kid's family didn't have the skills and he hasn't picked them up. And he would have to put an effort in to learn what those skills are to manage his own anxiety. And maybe once you're an adult, you have to start doing these things. So we know that a lot of things are simple, like they say, eat less, move more. That's simple, right? But it's not always easy. So if you if you put a little effort in, you can learn ways to work with yourself, just like with motivational interviewing, instead of where doctors used to say, do this, do that, and then they would assume that the patients would do it, and if they didn't, they were non-compliant. With the idea of motivational interviewing, we've come up with some techniques to help people get from this is what I should do to this is where I'm starting, and this is the plan, this is the action plan to make this happen. So I think sometimes when you are meeting with a patient, or when you're just talking with a family, or when you're in your head thinking, I should do this, what you would like is to turn it into some sort of an action plan, whether it's, I want to start running, but all I can really do is put my running shoes on and run in place in the house, because I just don't have the bandwidth to do the big thing today, to get out there, So you may have to start small, and it may be that learning to work with yourself, like say, okay, I want to have a neat house. I'm going to start by committing to making my bed every day when I get up. Make my bed, whether I have time or not, I'm just going to do it. And then when you see that, you get the little dopamine hit from, hey, that looks nice. I got all those wrinkles smoothed out. And then you go on and you do more things. And so I think having action plans and using some smart psychological techniques like we learned in motivational interviewing is really helpful for working with yourself, and assuming that there's skills that you can learn. And it's not that you're this kind of person or that kind of person, but that you can learn to be the person you want to be. I like 30-day trials. I talked my husband into doing a 30-day trial of no dairy because he was always complaining of arthritis, arthritis. I'm like, okay, but there's a lot of people who have big bony joints. And I asked them, does that hurt? And they say no, because it's not inflamed, even though you can have arthritis, but it doesn't have to be all inflamed. And I thought that dairy was impacting that for him, and he thought it was ridiculous, but he was willing to do a 30-day trial. And he found out that there was non-dairy ice cream, and there was non-dairy cheese, and there was non-dairy, there was almond milk that he could put on his cereal. And he went 30 days and his arthritis complaints were reduced like 80%. And so he kept on going with it, because even though he didn't think it was going to be effective, it actually was. And so sometimes you can do a 2-week trial or a 30-day trial with people for some lifestyle change that they don't think is valuable, but then they find out it is by experience. And so a lot of things we want to do are worth doing, but it's just a little bit hard to get going on it. Toothbrushing is one of those things that caught on over time. It started out, people didn't brush their teeth. People just ate a lot of fiber. Like if you bite into an apple, toothbrush, and then there was a advice to brush your teeth twice a day, but nobody did it until in World War I. They had this thing called trench mouth, where a lot of people's soldiers' teeth were falling out in the trenches. And in World War II, they made the GIs brush their teeth twice a day. And then when they came home from the war, they kept doing it, and they taught their families to do it. And then it became a normal thing that everybody does. And if you don't brush your teeth twice a day, you're really letting yourself go. But I think meditation may be something like that, where, twice a day meditation or once a day meditation just becomes the norm. And I think that it would be really good for us in the modern world, because we just don't have those positive relaxation promoting things in our world anymore. So I want to tell you to take heart. This is a quote from Jon Kabat-Zinn. No matter what is wrong with you, there is more right with you than wrong with you. If you are alive, there is something to work with. Jon Kabat-Zinn is a meditation guru who has several nice body scanning meditations available online. Pain, alienation, and exhaustion are potentially fixable. I don't want to tell you that if you're working in a terrible system that is abusing you, that you need to just take a yoga class. That's not what my message is. I think there are times when the situation you're in, you just need to change. You just need to get out of there, take your life and go. But if you're feeling, you're looking around you and everything looks black, and those things are potentially within your ability to improve. You can regain that taste of wholeness, that freedom, and there's a wide world of inner capacity that's waiting to open up for you and your patients. That's all I have to say.
Wonderful. So just for those that are interested, I put some links in the in the chat box. I'm also going to have a document that will be embedded in the YouTube link to this also. I think many of you know that we have a YouTube link. All these lectures are there. We figured out how to embed both the PowerPoints as well as any notes. So there's will be a sheet of notes on there that has the links that Alice referenced,
Mhm.
including one to John Cabot is in. So you can go into the YouTube channel, just scroll down in the description, and you'll see that document, open it up, and all those links will be there for you. It's good stuff. This is for our own self-care, our own well-being. And this is one of those really wonderful lectures that has stuff that's applicable to ourselves as well as to our patients.
Mhm.
And we need to kind of practice what we preach. We know there's going to be a benefit, and I've learned a lot every time I listen to this. So in the links, this one to the John Cabot's in, the nutrition link, the Herb Benson, and I also threw another one in, and just a shameless self-promotion song that I wrote and recorded a few years ago that relates to the topic. So if you feel so inspired, you can listen to that. So
Great.
any questions that anyone has for Alice? We'll go ahead and stop the screen sharing here. Here we go. And we'll start our transition to the case. But
Yeah.
for those that have any questions or comments for Alice, please.
I just thank you. I mean, that's wonderful stuff.